Good afternoon, everyone. I see that folks are still trickling in here. I will repeat our welcome for this afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining day one of the Board of Environmental Safety meeting. Again, my name is Evelyn Nuno, the board specialist. And for folks that are still trickling in, I will be clerking for the first half of this meeting, and we'll hand it off to Courtney Bailey, our newest board specialist, to clerk the last half of the meeting. I would like to note Chair Rizzo is joining remotely pursuant to Bagley-Keene rules. She will be part of our in-person quorum for a procedural vote following this welcome. That will be joining Vice Chair Hacker and Member Bhatia. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. By your continued participation is acknowledgement that you are being recorded. Today is August 28th, 2024 at 2:03 p.m. and the meeting is now called to order.
Thank you, Evelyn. Please call the roll.
Sushma Bhatia.
Present.
Ingrid Brostrom is absent for in-person quorum. Georgette Gomez absent for in-person quorum. Jeannie Rizzo.
Present.
And Vice Chair Alexis Strauss-Hacker.
Present.
Thank you. We have 3 members present and a quorum is established.
Thank you, Evelyn. Our first point of action this afternoon will be for the board to take a procedural vote to authorize remote participation for Member Brostrom and Member Gomez. In accordance with SB 544, it requires this body to take action to allow their remote participation and to visibly appear on camera during the open portion of the meeting. Members, we're sorry that you aren't able to join us in person. We're very happy to have you joining us to participate remotely. Once you are up on screen, I need to ask you each a quick procedural question. Please confirm whether there are any other individuals 18 years of age or older present with you in the room. Member Brostrom?
No.
And Member Gomez?
No.
With that, can I please have a motion to approve remote participation for Member Brostrom and Member Gomez in this meeting?
I so move.
Thank you. A second, please.
Yes, I second.
Seconded by Member Bhatia. Any discussion? Any abstentions? Evelyn, would you please call the vote?
Yes, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Sushma Bhatia.
Yes.
Ingrid Brostrom will be absent for this vote and Georgette Gomez as well. Jeannie Rizzo.
Yes.
Alexis Strauss-Hacker.
Yes.
Great. We have 3 ayes to authorize remote participation for Member Brostrom and Member Gomez. A full quorum is now established with the addition of Member Brostrom and Gomez joining remotely. Thank you, members. I will now review some logistical items for today's hybrid meeting. It is being held both in person and remotely via Zoom and phone. For those joining us on Zoom, please select your preferred language option, either English or Spanish, by clicking the interpretation icon on your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see the icon, you may need to update your Zoom application. In-person participants who prefer to participate in Spanish can obtain headsets from our interpretation table at the side of the room here or at the registration table. Additionally, if you're in person and following along on Zoom, please ensure your device's speaker and microphone are muted. If anyone experiences connectivity issues with Zoom, you can call in for either English or Spanish. The phone numbers now are provided to you on this slide, and they will be provided in the chat. They're also posted on our website. You will now hear from one of our interpreters to provide these instructions for us in Spanish.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. Appreciate it. Muy buenas tardes a todos ustedes. El día de hoy se proporcionan servicios de interpretación para que puedan escuchar todo en vivo, tal como lo están pronunciando. Ahora, si nos va a acompañar el día de hoy en línea, en la parte inferior de su pantalla, usted verá un icono en forma de un mundo. Favor de presionar el mundo y elegir el idioma de su preferencia. En este caso sería español. Una vez que lo elija, presionarlo nuevamente y elegir poner en silencio audio original. Esto le permitirá escuchar la interpretación en vivo de todo lo que se está sucediendo. Si usted, de lo contrario, está en la sala de modalidad presencial, favor de dirigirse a la parte de atrás donde está una mesita para que le puedan proporcionar unos audífonos y pueda escuchar toda la reunión en vivo tal como se la presentamos. Si tiene algún problema técnico, no dude, por favor, en levantar su mano y con mucho gusto lo apoyaremos o escribirlo en el chat y lo acompañaremos para que se pueda solucionar ese inconveniente. De muchas gracias y que tengan una buena reunión. Evelyn, back to you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Aldo. And we would like to thank both Aldo and Leticia from Cal Interpretation and Translations, Inc., who are interpreting today's meeting for us in Spanish. I will now go over some meeting logistics. Please look around you now and identify 2 exits closest to you. In some cases, an exit may be behind you. In the event of a fire alarm, we are required to evacuate this room. Please take your valuables with you and do not use the elevators. Evacuees will exit down the stairways and out of the building. Should we have to relocate out of the building, please obey all traffic signals and exercise caution crossing the street. Some housekeeping items: the drinking fountain and restrooms are located out these doors at the back of the room to the left, past the glass chandelier, and the drinking fountain and restrooms are located there on the right. With the exception of water, food and drinks are not allowed in the auditorium. Agenda times may fluctuate to accommodate all agenda items, and meeting materials are available on the registration table located at the entrance of the auditorium, and they can also be found on our website at bes.dtsc.ca.gov. Closed captions are enabled, and you can move the caption display or turn it off altogether. To protect everyone's virtual space and networks, the Q&A function will serve as our chat to prevent harmful spam links from being shared with our virtual attendees. It will be used for individuals that are experiencing technical difficulties or are unable to make verbal comments. Please begin your comment with "please read aloud," and a staff member will notify me. To ensure that all board members are fully present and focused on today's presentations and discussions, they are not reading or following along in the chat. All participants will remain muted until a Zoom host unmutes them once recognized. Only the board clerk and presenters' videos or screens will be shared. Some quick instructions on how to comment. We are looking forward to hearing public comments throughout the meeting, and we have scheduled times on the agenda to do so. But please note, our public forum for items not on the agenda will be heard tomorrow, August 29th, during the public forum session, or agenda item number 5. It will be held approximately at 12 o'clock. For those that wish to comment during tomorrow's public forum, we strongly encourage you to sign up before midnight tonight using the public forum sign up link, which will be provided to you now in the chat or shortly. Sign up is not required, but is strongly recommended. For those that are unable to sign up prior to the cutoff, we will have comment cards available at the registration desk in person, and you may submit it either to myself, my colleague Courtney, or Sheena before public forum opens tomorrow. During tomorrow's public forum, we will recognize the sign-up list first and then call on those that submitted a comment card in the order that they were received. And to reiterate, the public sign-up link and comment cards are only required for those that wish to comment during public forum. If you would like to express your comment in writing, you may submit it via email to besinfo@bes.dtsc.ca.gov. That concludes the introductory review for today's meeting. I will now hand it over to Vice Chair Hacker for agenda item number 2.
Thank you, Evelyn. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first of 2 days of our Board of Environmental Safety public meeting. I'd like to start with Chair Rizzo, who is going to give opening remarks.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Alexis, for all you do, and in particular for chairing this meeting. While I regret, as I know members Gomez and Brostrom do, not being physically present today, as we're complying with COVID protocols, which just reminds me to remind all of you to be aware that we are having an uptick in COVID again. So be mindful of that in your world. We will be fully engaged during the meeting, and we thank you, all of you who are in attendance in person, and I can see there's about 100 of you on Zoom. So we thank you for your continued interest and support of the work of the board and DTSC. Since we last met in July, board and staff have been very busy, and you'll hear all about our progress over the next 2 days. As part of SB 158-driven reforms, both Dr. Williams and I appeared before a joint legislative oversight committee on the 13th of August to provide our annual updates and to field questions from the committee members. Transparency about our progress and challenges to date was the overarching theme of the hearing. And now that the convention's over, you can fill your screen time by watching the recordings of the hearing, where Dr. Williams reported on the accomplishments made and challenges faced by the department over the past year. My board report focused on how the board has tackled literally all of our 158 mandates. Key among them are items on this meeting's agenda, including fee setting, which will be tomorrow, a discussion today about our permit appeals process, and then you'll hear a lot more from the rest of our team. The board and our staff, under the leadership of our executive officer, Swati Sharma, have addressed and made great progress. So we are delighted to have an expanded staff that has worked really hard with Swati to support the board. So on that note, I'll turn it back over to Vice Chair Hacker, who will be chairing this meeting for the next 2 days. And I appreciate you all. Thank you.
My fault. This morning, all board members participated in a closed session to discuss litigation, and no action was taken. Secondly, I wanted to mention that we had considered putting on today's agenda the updated operational guidelines for our board. We're going to move that to the October meeting. And lastly, today we're going to vote on updating some of our permit appeal protocols. And we will get into that quite soon. But first, I'd like to introduce our executive officer, Swati Sharma, who will provide us with her executive officer report.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair Hacker. Thank you. Next slide, please. So as I do with all of our meetings, I'd like to provide an update from the action items from the previous board meeting. Many of these items are still in flux, but I would still like to provide an update. We had a request for BES representation at the Safer Consumer Product workshops for August. There was a few of them, and our ombuds, Lauren, has been attending them and will be our kind of point person for safer consumer products and all the several workshops going forward. There was also a request for the metrics subcommittee to work with DTSC and review the enforcement strategic plan and crafting appropriate metrics. And that ongoing work with DTSC's team and our metrics subcommittee has been meeting regularly. So that is an ongoing process. And we hope to have an update on next steps and timeline later in the fall. There was also a request for BES to share with board members detailed fee structure and number of businesses in each category. BES staff met with board members and provided detailed fee structure as well as number of businesses in each category and answered any questions related to fee structure. There was also a public comment from Levon Stone, the executive director of Fort Ord Environmental Justice Network, and our ombuds, Lauren, has been in touch with Levon Stone and provided resources and answered many of the questions that Levon had. Next slide, please. Next item, I would like to provide an update on the hazardous waste facilities operating permit decision status report that DTSC is working on and provide what the board's role in all of this is. So Senate Bill 158 imposed permit decision timelines for operating permits expiring before January 1st, 2025. DTSC is required to issue a decision on permit renewals either within 3 years after the end of the permit's fixed term, or 2, within 3 years of the effective date of that statute, whichever is later. Next slide, please. If a permit decision has not been issued by the applicable deadline, DTSC shall issue a report which shall be released to the public and the facilities that includes the reasons why the permit decision was not made on time. Next slide, please. And this is the timeline for the report and next steps. So DTSC will issue and release a report to the BES and to the public in September of 2024. After that, BES will provide 60 days for facilities to respond with a written brief and also for public comment after the report is issued. BES will also hold a public hearing in January of 2025, where DTSC will present details of the report and propose a schedule for permit decisions. And at that time, BES will vote to modify or approve that proposed schedule. Next slide, please. Next, I would like to just share what our upcoming board meeting dates are. The next one is in October, which will be taking place in Los Angeles on October 16th and 17th. And December 4th and 5th, that'll be back here in Sacramento. Next slide, please. And then these are our 2025 tentative board meeting dates. Locations are still to be determined. All of this information is also on our website, and please refer to our website as these dates sometimes change according to different scheduling issues. And that is it. And I'll turn to the board members to see if they have any questions.
For our board members participating remotely, do you have any questions of our EO?
I have a comment, not a question. I think this makes sense for the metrics subcommittee to consider adding a metric around the number of delayed permit decisions for us to track, given what you just presented. Swati, do you have any perspective to add?
Yeah, I guess we could discuss that internally as well, and with DTSC, since there's already this other reporting mechanism that's tracking it as well, but it could be a metric, but since there's this other avenue, I don't know if it'd be duplicative, but we could certainly discuss that. I will also add that the reports will be available on our website as well as DTSC's website, but we can certainly discuss if this is an appropriate metric to add.
Very well. Let's move to agenda item 4. I'd like to introduce
Very quickly, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Hacker, I wanted to open public comment for this agenda item, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice Chair. We will now open the floor for public comment for agenda item number 3, Executive Officer Report. Very quickly, I'll reiterate some of the instructions for participating. Those that are joining us in person and wish to comment, please raise your hand and I will call you up individually. For those joining us on Zoom, please raise your virtual hand on Zoom on your toolbar or press *9 on your phone. If you've joined the Spanish channel by phone, please wait for the interpreters to provide instructions. I will acknowledge each commenter by first and last name as displayed on Zoom, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce any names. We ask that your comment take no longer than 3 minutes, and for your convenience, you will see a timer located on the screen. We will also use timing cue cards for your convenience and will alert you when your time is up. The time allotted will be doubled for participants expressing their comment in Spanish to allow time for translation. And if you're commenting in Spanish, please let us know at the start of your comment. I will start with commenters in person. Are there any participants that would like to comment on agenda item number 3? Seeing none, I'll move to Zoom. For our participants, I do see one hand from Yvonne Martinez.
Yes, I
Let me
would just
see if
like
I
to
can
ask.
try to. There we go. Please state your name and affiliation.
This is Yvonne Martinez Watson. I'm the chair of the Environmental and Social Justice Committee for the Sierra Club Angeles chapter and Sierra Club California Environmental and Social Justice Committee. I would just like to ask the board in the future to please put your instructions for evacuations. If you are on a floor above the first floor, please instruct anybody in your audience who may be disabled on how they can evacuate the building. Because if you're asking them not to use the elevator, they have to have an alternative to get out. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that feedback, Yvonne. I appreciate that. We will we've made a note of that. Are there any other participants on Zoom that would like to comment on agenda item number 3? Seeing none, we'll check with our Spanish interpreters to notify me if we have any comments from the Spanish line. One second while I get that confirmation. Okay, great. None on the Spanish channel. That concludes public comment for agenda item number 3, Executive Officer Report. I will now hand it over to Madam Vice Chair.
I will just add one more thing, that we will have written instructions on our website on how facilities can submit their written briefs related to the hazardous waste facility operating permit decision status report. So next week, we hope to post those directions.
On the subject of hazardous waste facilities, I'd like to introduce agenda item 4 with our board counsel, Greg Forrest. We're going to discuss our permit appeal process. At our last meeting in July, we had previewed how we would like to make some small changes to our current protocols. Today, we're going to have board discussion and invite further public comment, and the board will then take a vote on our 2 updated standing orders. To recap, not the entirety of our permit appeal process is on the table here today. We are proposing to make updates to our 2 standing orders, which focus on the early stages in compiling the administrative record and making it accessible to the public. Please note, the standing order, now numbered 2401, that final document was revised since our July board meeting. The updated version is dated August 26th of this year. It's been added to our website for today's meeting, and the board will vote on the updated documents available on the website. So I'd like to turn this over to Greg and then look forward to engaging with you on this topic.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hacker. And apologies for the late version there. We had some last minute changes to the standing order. I have a very short slideshow, so if you could just advance a slide for me. In our July board meeting, we discussed changes to both of the standing orders. Just to recap, the standing order 2401 provides rules for the administration of appeals and deals with matters like the administrative record and briefing. And then the other standing order provides rules for public hearings. At this point, we've gone back and made additional changes to standing order 2401, particularly around completion of the administrative record. And the key changes that I want to go over with you all right now is, first, we've shifted our focus to the index that's provided for the administrative record. The older version sort of contemplated that the entire administrative record would be provided to the board. And we've come to understand that that may be possible in some cases, but not in all cases, and that it's a better approach to focus on having an index that specifies all contents of that administrative record, and also to specify in that index what portions of the administrative record are available electronically. The other key change to the order is we've added a meet and confer process. And so the focus of that process would be very early in the appeal. So it'd be right after we receive that index, so shortly after the appeal has been filed. And we would be focusing there with the parties on completing the administrative record or ensuring that the administrative record in the index is complete, providing access to the administrative record electronically, or at least defining the scope of the record available electronically. And then we'd also have an opportunity to understand whether council would be available for future hearings and to start that scheduling process. So that's what we're contemplating in a meet and confer, and that's really the most significant change from the prior version. If you could just advance one more. So in our last meeting, we talked about one of the challenges with the administrative record in that there is a sort of a catch-all category, the documents contained in the supporting file. We included an appendix in the standing order. We've retained that in this version. It lists the items that should be included in the record. The main change in this version is clarity that the standard that determines whether a particular document is included in the administrative record is really dictated by the permitting division because it's their decision. And if they relied on a particular document, then it'll be included. So we have built in that understanding and recognition into this order, but we also have a meet and confer process where parties can provide their input and we can have a kind of a process to sort through and determine whether that administrative record index needs to be expanded. Next slide. So just to refresh the permit appeals process that we have. So this flow chart shows basically how the appeal process unfolds. It starts, of course, with a final permit decision. That's notice that goes out to the community and to the parties that then would respond with the filing of an appeal. And as you know, in our appeal process, filing an appeal is rather straightforward because it's just a simple one-page form. So once that's filed, the administrative record index gets submitted, and that would then start the meet and confer process. And it's important to note here that that happens before the full petition is submitted. And that's a major change from the way that the appeals process worked before the board was created, that we have this gap in time where the petition comes later. And there's been some uncertainty or lack of clarity around when the administrative record comes in versus when the appeal is submitted. And so I'm hoping that this clarifies that we get started on that process in all cases before the petition is even filed. Once that petition's filed, then we're hoping that that meet and confer process would conclude. If we're not able to resolve the issues, or better to say, if the parties aren't able to resolve all their issues around the administrative record through the meet and confer, they have the ability to file motions. Those would be heard and determined. And we'd like to see all those issues raised in the meet and confer, resolved, and then reported to the board and the public when the board adopts an initial order. It's at that point that we are anticipating that the administrative record will be complete. From there, the parties move forward with briefing. And then once briefing is completed, we would hold a public hearing and make a decision on the appeal at the hearing and then issue a final order after that. So we've indicated on this slide the updates or the sort of new elements to the process. And I'm happy to answer any questions. That's the last slide I had. So let me know if you have any questions on that.
I would be glad to take from our remotely participating board members. Chair Rizzo, you first.
Thank you, Greg. I just want to clarify the meet and confer can be a request by any of the parties to the appeal. Isn't that correct? And that's the way it's reflected in your document. So,
right.
So either the department, the appellant, the board, the facility, if nobody feels a need to meet and confer, you don't have to have one. But if any one party does, then that triggers making it happen, correct?
Yeah, so we would anticipate that the meet and confer would be a very likely outcome most of the time. It's not automatic. It's not a mandatory feature. So not every appeal probably would warrant a meet and confer process, but certainly the larger, clearly large renewal permits are more likely to warrant a meet and confer process. So it's optional.
Thank you.
Board Member Brostrom.
I just want to make sure I heard correctly that the meet and confer happened very early in the process, including before even a petition is submitted. But I think I also heard you say that process could continue after petition submittal. Just wanting to get clarification that meet and confer is somewhat flexible in terms of timing, so that, even after the petition is submitted, can a meet and confer happen at that point as well?
Yeah, I think that's right. So, why we're showing that the administrative record is completed later is because oftentimes it does take some time to determine the completeness of that record. And in particular, where parties would like to see parts of the record digitized that are not available in digital format, that could be something that extends that period and adds a bit of time. So, to file a petition, a party really needs to base that off of issues that have been raised in the public review period, the draft permit review period. And so while there are additional items that may be supplemented in the administrative record, we didn't see the need to hold that up. And so to allow time to complete that record without holding up the appeal too much, there is some overlap.
Anything further from Jeannie, Ingrid, Georgette? Very well. Sushma? I think we'd be ready for public comment.
Great, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I will start with our Zoom participants this time. If there are folks that would like to raise their virtual hand or press *9 on their phone to comment on agenda item number 4, please do so now, and one of our hosts will recognize you to speak. I don't see any at the moment. I will check with the in-person participants now. Anyone that'd like to comment on agenda item number 4? Seeing none, I will ask Spanish interpreters to ask the Spanish line if there's any Spanish comments. And at the same time, this will be last call for Zoom participants and in-person participants to comment on here. Thank you, Aldo, for confirming no Spanish comments at this time. And seeing none in person or on Zoom, that will conclude this comment period for agenda item number 4, the permit appeal process. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Evelyn. Double checking that all of the expertise in this room isn't going to comment on this. I can move on. I think we're ready for a motion on the updated standing orders. We're going to take them separately. May I please have a motion to approve Standing Order 24-01, which establishes rules for the administration of appeals? We have a motion from Board Member Gomez. May I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Board Chair Rizzo. Do we have discussion? Any abstentions? Any amendments? Evelyn, would you please call the vote?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Sushma Bhatia,
Yes.
Ingrid Brostrom,
Aye.
Georgette Gomez,
Yes.
Jeannie Rizzo,
Yes.
and Alexis Strauss-Hacker.
Yes.
Great, thank you. We have a unanimous vote to for Standing Order 2401, establishing rules for the administration of appeals.
Thank you, Evelyn and board members. Now may I please have a motion to approve Standing Order 2402, which establishes rules for the conduct of appeals hearings. We have a motion from Board Member Bhatia. May I have a second?
Oh, second, Gomez.
Board Member Gomez. Is there any discussion? Are there any abstentions or amendments? Well then, Evelyn, it's time to call the vote.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Sushma Bhatia,
Yes.
Ingrid Brostrom. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Georgette Gomez,
Yes.
Jeannie Rizzo,
Yes.
and Alexis Strauss-Hacker.
Yes.
Thank you, members. We have a unanimous approval for Standing Order 2402, establishing rules for the conduct of appeal hearings. Both Standing Orders 2401 and 2402 will be posted on the board's website in the next few days. Back to you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. I hope that our intent here is clear, that after being together as a board and putting through our permit appeal regulations and hearing a couple of permit appeals, we could see a couple of areas where in working with our partners at DTSC, in working with the public and other appeal parties, that it was time to update a couple of the procedures that we had put together at the beginning. And I imagine that in a couple of years, we will need to continue to do so. So thank you for your patience as we go through this process. Want to thank our board clerk, Evelyn, and would like to now introduce Courtney Bailey, who will be our board clerk for the remainder of this meeting. We're moving to agenda item 5, board member reports, where our board will report on any updates they've had since our last meeting in July, which typically include our subcommittee and liaison assignments and any public engagement updates. And if I may I start with you, board member Bhatia?
Great. Thank you, Alexis. I'm going to provide an update on the 3 subcommittees that I'm a part of. First, I'll start with the metrics subcommittee that I'm working on with the board staff and also with Ingrid. Ingrid, feel free to chime in once I'm done with the metrics update. All right, first I'm going to recap where we are with the metrics subcommittee. At the last board meeting, we provided an update that the subcommittee met and did multiple deep dive sessions with Katie and Katie's team. This is the hazardous waste management division. And we looked at the metrics that are currently in place, published on the KPI dashboard, as well as referenced in the director priorities. We reviewed them to evaluate whether the intent of the metric is adequately captured and whether or not we recommended expanding them to better meet the intent behind the metric. So those list of recommendations have been written out and we've been reviewing them with the DTSC team. Our goal is once we're done with the review session with DTSC, we will host a public engagement forum, likely a workshop this fall in October or November. So please look for more information on that. And then our next step after the public engagement workshop, depending on the input we get, our goal is to realign with DTSC on the suggested metrics and then to make a recommendation to the full board, ideally by the end of the year at the December board meeting. So that is on the metrics piece. I'm going to pause here and see if Ingrid has anything to add before I move on.
Nothing to add.
Okay, great. I'm going to move to the next update, which is related to the hazardous waste management plan subcommittee. This is another subcommittee that I am part of along with Ingrid. Again, so Ingrid, I'll invite you to chime in and also several of our board staff. To recap where we are with the hazardous waste management plan development. Last year, as you all know, DTSC published the hazardous waste management report, and they are working towards releasing a plan next year in 2025. So our focus as a subcommittee has been on two different areas. The first area is as it relates to community engagement. We want to make sure that there's enough forums provided for community members to internalize the very complex data and recommendations being generated through this process by DTSC. And the second area is to understand the way the plan is being developed and provide recommendations to shape and strengthen the plan, but also to make sure that the recommendations that we provided as a board last year are being incorporated through the plan. So to recap, first of all, DTSC has been holding multiple workshops on the community engagement side. We've also developed a tentative calendar for what the outreach activities might look like next year. In terms of the plan itself, we have received a draft version of the table of contents, and we've been reviewing that with DTSC and providing feedback on how best to not just organize the information, but also how best to incorporate some of the recommendations we previously provided. I'm going to pause here. Ingrid, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add.
All right. The third subcommittee is on the fees subcommittee. I'm part of this with our chair, Jeannie. There is going to be a lot of detailed discussion on fees, so I'm not going to cover a deep dive right now on fees. So this is a plug to say, come back tomorrow. We have a whole hour dedicated to fees, and you'll hear a lot more from me. I have one other update, which is a recap of a meeting with a representative from Republic Services. I think several board members have already met with them. I'm going to provide a brief update from that conversation. Specifically, I met with Mr. Mike Caprio in the context of the hazardous waste management plan and development process. I'm going to recap two key themes that came out of this conversation. And this will be followed up with a memo that will be submitted to the board EO for publication on our website. So first, Mike expressed their concern about the second order and third order implications of changing the waste codes. Specifically, they shared that changing the waste codes would now allow for certain categories of waste that are currently considered hazardous waste to end up in municipal landfills. And those municipal landfills are likely located in more urban areas. And one potential implication might be that the communities that are live adjacent to these municipal landfills may express concerns about these new waste categories ending up closer to their communities. And they also cautioned that we may run into a situation where the municipal landfill operators and owners may not accept these new categories of waste should the waste code changes be processed. The second piece of input they provided was that they invited us to more holistically consider the harm or health and benefits of treating hazardous waste within the state versus outside of the state. They asked us to consider the fact that in certain situations, the hazardous waste landfills that are located outside of the state are farther away from communities, and the waste might be transported by railroad instead of maybe by large trucks. That can tend to happen when the waste is shipped and stays within the state of California. They also provided several other dimensions for us to consider, such as groundwater depth and additional exposure pathways outside of groundwater that might make the overall harm calculation more favorable for out-of-state hazardous waste management. So with that, I conclude my report. I think this individual has met with, the stakeholder has met with multiple board members. So if anyone wants to add anything, please feel free to do so in your reports. Thank you.
Thanks so much. May I turn to Board Member Brostrom?
Yes, well, I think, remember, I gave most of my my reports too, but to quickly recap, I've been meeting with the Committee on Performance Metrics, and Board Member Bhatia expressed quite well what we've been doing there with our focus on the hazardous waste, the hazardous waste category, and also meeting regularly with the subcommittee on the hazardous waste management plan, also already covered. In addition to those two subcommittees, I am also on the subcommittee for SB 673, and we did have meetings and the release of the track 2, the initial fact sheet there. So we had a chance to review that material and provide some feedback on the first fact sheet that has now come out. In addition, there has received a revised set of documents on EJAC, and currently in the process of reviewing those documents as well. Then finally, also had received a request for a meeting from representative of Republic Services, Michael Caprio, and had a similar meeting discussing the impact of allowing non-RCRA waste to be disposed of in California landfills. and, the impacts communities in California versus, the waste that is currently going out of state, what the impacts might be of those facilities that are currently accepting California waste in terms of just the characteristics of the community, in proximity. So, also had similar conversations as was just reported. And I think that's all for me.
Thank you. Board Member Gomez.
Well, Ingrid mentioned EJAC, and we're in the process of reviewing the documents that were shared by DTSC, so we're in that process right now. We also have CBCI, but that right now is that committee is getting adjusted since we did the report, the analysis, and shared with the full board. We're trying to figure out how to proceed. X-Site has been a little bit more active this month. We had I drove to the site on the 14th of this month, where we had a tour with the third-party monitor along with DTSC staff, as well as with the working group, ETAC. And the whole premise of that was to be a bridge between the third-party monitor and the folks that are doing the work, the cleanup, just to introduce everybody and ensure that there's that everybody's operating from the same lens, which is to ensure that expediency on the cleanup, but doing it in a way that is not creating additional harm to the environment, to the workers as they're doing the work, and also to the residents that are living in the homes that the work's being done. It was a really good opportunity to introduce everybody that is involved between the third-party monitor, ETAG members, DTSC staff, and myself with everybody. So it was a good tour that happened there. There were some follow-ups that came from it, which is just some concerns of the workers and the suits that are given because of the summer. Right now, DTSC is doing some research to try to find suits that are useful for protecting the workers, but also are breathable, because it's really hot. So they're kind of wrestling with that right now. So we're looking into that. In addition to that tour, I mean, there were other things that came from that meeting. But and in addition to the tour, we also ETAG had a meeting with EPA in the discourse to get a better understanding of what is happening with the evaluation of adding the site to the Superfund designation. So there was a full discussion of that whole process. And then that triggered a community meeting where EPA was revealing how they were going to be proceeding, which is there was a PowerPoint which we will share. Hopefully we have access to it. I think we have access to it. We'll send it to the full board. But basically EPA is moving forward with the recommendation of adding the site to as a Superfund. That's the recommendation of the staff based on their analysis. And then from there, if it gets accepted, there's a bunch of different work that needs to happen, which is what the whole purpose of the workshop was. And also the meeting with the ETAC members, just we went over what's going to happen once that recommendation moves forward. It's going to get either accepted or rejected, most likely accepted. If it does, then there's another layer of work that they need to do in terms of to determine the radius of the cleanup that needs to occur, and for how much of a cleanup as well. So there's another layer of analysis that needs to happen. So it's not a system, it's not a process that is going to happen overnight. It's still some months from now, probably a year from now. I don't remember the full timeline that was shared, but I'll definitely send all the information that was shared with us to the full board, and also for the audience, it is already on the Exide website, the presentation that was shared with us. And then from that, in addition to having the discussion of EPA, we also just had another a fuller discussion during the public meeting in relation to what is happening with the worker retention, the hiring, related to hiring from the community. And then DTSC also just talked about their process, and this is in relation to the community meeting that happened. So it was just an opportunity to communicate with the greater community on what's been happening in relation to introducing the third-party monitor to the full community. That was the first. Having EPA report on what's happening with their analysis. And also there was representatives from labor and talking about what they're doing and how it's impacting the work that they're doing with the rest of the community. So it's been a full month of Exide for me.
Thank you so much, Board Member Gomez. And now to Chair Rizzo.
Thank you. I mostly want to compliment all the subcommittee work, and I think when we came up with the concept of subcommittees, we thought we were responding primarily to the Bagley-Keene requirements, but I think it turns out to be a really good infrastructure for the board, because there's deep dives by members of the board with community, with facilities, with the department, and the opportunity to really work on things together. So I want to compliment that work. You'll hear a lot more, as Member Bhatia said, about the fees subcommittee work tomorrow. So that's been a primary interest and involvement that I've been engaged in is with fees subcommittee, and also some of the legislative issues that have come up, a couple of which came up at the hearing for sure. There's a lot of bills swirling around everything from lithium to metal shredders. So I think there's a lot more that we'll wind up talking about at our next board meeting that will come out of final legislation once the legislature and the governor complete their process. The impact of that on the department, on the board's oversight, will be something that we'll be addressing in future meetings. But I really want to compliment all the staff and the board subcommittees for the deep dives they've been doing. I think you've done a great job, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair Rizzo. I will go last. I am part of the Permit Appeals Subcommittee and worked with our BES team on the updating of the standing orders and the like that we discussed and voted on today. And with Member Brostrom, joined with the DTSC SB 673 team in materials that will be presented tomorrow. As part of the executive team, I assisted the chair with her remarks to the legislature that she discussed at the outset of our meeting and in planning this meeting. And I've been enjoying working with our executive officer in interviewing candidates for a couple of the vacancies that we have on our little board. So with that, I'd like to turn to our board clerk, Courtney, for public comment, if any.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I will take over the role of board clerk for the remainder of this meeting. We will now go ahead and open the floor for public comment for agenda item number 5, board member reports. I will start with our Zoom participants first, and please raise your virtual hand if you would like to comment on this item. And it does look like we have a hand raised in Zoom. So we're going to go ahead and invite you to speak. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hello, this is Yvonne Martinez-Watson, Chair of the Environmental and Social Justice Committee for both the Angeles chapter and Sierra Club California Sub-Sierra Club. I was an attendee at the EXIDE meeting in August, and I need some clarification. According to the EPA representative who was there, I thought I remember them saying that the EPA Superfund site designation would only affect the actual site of EXIDE, and that it would not actually provide any benefit to the surrounding community as far as cleanup in the communities. That they were focused on cleaning up the site because of the contamination in the soil that had migrated into the water below the site. Is this correct?
Board Member Gomez, do you want to respond?
Yeah, we can, I don't want to misspeak, but it is my understanding that they haven't determined how much cleanup in terms of the area that is going to be cleaned up, because that's like the next step that they're going to be doing. But I can follow up just to confirm, but that is my understanding.
And our executive officer?
So we don't have representatives from DTSC that could fully answer that question, but we will follow up with you once we find out. And tomorrow we will have perhaps others from DTSC that could provide an answer to that, but we will be following up with you soon.
I worked in the Superfund program for many years and worked on some NPL listing packages. And the approach taken of defining the site is something that EPA endeavors to do at the beginning of the process, but in the course of tracing contamination, whether surface or subsurface, aerial or otherwise, a site's boundaries can not only expand, but EPA has the authority to act beyond the originally defined boundaries. So what might have been, and I'll give you an example, for example, the Montrose DDT site in Los Angeles, what might have been the original boundary of Montrose when we drew it in the early mid 1980s, thinking the DDT extended to the Dominguez Channel. We know that there's far greater contamination offsite, and that doesn't limit the ability to respond. So the details of what will happen and the many plans that follow from NPL listing will come to the fore, and we will also have an opportunity to present that here. Back to you, Board Clerk.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. We will do one last ask for any Zoom participants to raise your virtual hand if you would like to make a public comment at this time. Seeing none, we will go ahead and move to our in-person participants. Please raise your hand if you would like to come up and make a public comment on this item. Board member reports. Seeing none, we will go ahead and just double check with our Spanish interpreters to confirm that there are no other public comments for this item number 5. Okay. That has been confirmed. Thank you very much, Spanish interpreters. So that concludes the public comment period for agenda item 5, board member reports.
Thank you, Courtney. We're moving to agenda item 6. We have draft minutes from our December 14th, 2023 and July 17th, 2024 board meetings for discussion and possible approval. Is there any discussion among board members with regard to those 2 sets of minutes? Seeing none, may I please have a motion to approve the December 14th and July 17th meeting minutes?
I make a motion.
Moved by Member Bhatia and seconded by Chair Rizzo. Is there any discussion, abstentions, or amendments? Very well. Courtney, could you please call the vote?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Sushma Bhatia,
Yes.
Ingrid Brostrom,
Yes.
Georgette Gomez,
Yes.
Jeannie Rizzo,
Yes.
and Alexis Strauss-Hacker.
Yes.
Great. We have 5 ayes, so that motion passes unanimously to approve the December 14th, 2023 and the July 17th, 2024 board meeting minutes. These meeting minutes, along with all other past meeting minutes, can be found on the board's website under past meeting materials.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank in particular our board members. As you know, some are under the weather and they have been ably supporting and participating in today's closed session and this public meeting. I want to thank also our board staff who did a lot to scramble for us to make today and tomorrow's meetings possible. Thank you to Aldo and Leticia, on the screen. Many people made possible today's meeting and we are most grateful. We are going to reconvene tomorrow at a slightly different time than we have in the past couple of years. We're going to start at 9:30 in this same meeting room. Today's meeting was of necessity, with the morning meeting as well, more of an internally focused board meeting agenda, board operational agenda, and tomorrow's meeting is more externally focused with our DTSC partners and others. We have a very important board vote, which occurs annually on setting the fee rates for the fiscal year. We will be joined by the DTSC Director Williams for her update, and we're looking forward to an update on DTSC's Safer Consumer Products Program and SB 673. So I hope that you may be able to join us. May I please have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Chair Rizzo, and a second. I see
Second.
Member Brostrom. And Courtney, could you please call the vote?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Sushma Bhatia,
Yes.
Ingrid Brostrom,
Yes.
Georgette Gomez,
Yes.
Jeannie Rizzo,
Yes.
Alexis Strauss-Hacker.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. That means the meeting is officially adjourned at 3:05 p.m. Thank you all.
Jean?